life that would give him the feeling of being worthwhile.
Welcome to another episode of Between Two Amps. Today we have Clayton Stevens from Entry and Touche Amore.
And is there anything else we forgot, Clayton?
No, that's
Any other projects you got going on?
Yeah.
Or?
No, that's it right now.
All right. And as per usual, we just talk about we can get started with gear and I guess what was your entry point first? Were you a musician before you started playing in punk band or getting into punk, or was it?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, music was around. My dad's a musician. He has a master's in music composition, and when he was younger, he did like music transcribing and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then kind of like gave up the music dream to have a family and all that stuff. So, just had a normal real estate job and stuff, but music was like around, and guitars were around, and the piano was a big part of my life too. Just like he's a very gifted piano player. And so, music was always around. The Beatles were always around, like Bob Dylan, like that type of stuff.
Cool.
So I always loved music, and I was always like really drawn to music at a very young age,
Mm-hmm.
I have memory of being like 5 and like wanting to ask my parents, like, can we get this Michael Jackson CD, or like, like just like the stuff that like at a very young age, like music already was like, so I definitely, it's hard to say I wanted to be a musician, but like music was just such a part of my life that like, I didn't even really consider music to not be in some sort of way. And then also at a pretty young age, I feel like, I heard Green Day. And so they were kind of like that rock band for me. But then what's funny is that I was talking about this with someone recently, like, because they were so big and they were on MTV, and like, by the time I got into them, they were already like on the Insomniac record and already the biggest band in the world or whatever, So, to me, I didn't even like really think of them as like a punk band. They were just like a band to me. They were like, like whatever. So then like, once I finally got into like Blink-182, that was like, oh, this is like punk rock. It's like, it's different. Yeah. It was before it was on MTV or whatever. So like that, once I discovered like Blink-182 and stuff like that, that kind of led me more down the punk. Like, I specifically want to get into punk, and then people kind of give you the typical Sex Pistols, Ramones, 77 package, whatever.
Starter pack.
Totally. Starter pack, exactly. So, and then once I got into that stuff, I definitely wanted to play music, and that was probably like, 12 years old, something like that, somewhere around there. At that point, I really wanted to. Like I said, there was a guitar around. There were guitars around in general. My dad had a couple guitars, and he had taught me like cowboy chord, G major, C major, D major, and I loved playing that. But I didn't understand how I could play like Green Day or Blink-182. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't figure out no one taught me the power chord. Yeah. Like I was just like stuck with these 3 chords. But I wanted to start a band so bad that like my friends were being like, oh, we should start a punk band like the Misfits, or something like that, whatever. And I would just be like, well, I can play guitar because I'd learned these chords, but I didn't really know how to play guitar, But then Tyler, who's actually the bass player in Touche, like he and I grew up playing music together, and we were in all of our first bands together and everything. So like he had taken lessons for playing bass. So he had learned like some Clash songs and some pretty cool like punk riffs and stuff like that. So he would show something, and then I would just try and copy it on the guitar basically. Okay. And that's kind of how I learned that. And then I don't really remember who showed me the power chord, but I definitely remember having that moment of like, oh my God, this is what I've been searching for like for so long.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that has been the common denominator in all the interviews so far is like you're searching for that like kind of like that key, and then once you find the power chord, you're like, oh my God, I can do all this, you know?
Yeah.
And then you know, for me at least years later is when I started refining like learning different chords, you know. But at
Oh,
first
yeah.
it's like,
That-
oh, this is it. It just opened up the
that
floodgates.
was all
you know?
I needed, you know, because like for me it was just like I just want to be in a band, like whatever
Yeah.
that means, however I can do it, whatever gets me in the room with other people playing, you know. That was just always what it was.
So when you were getting into like Blink-182 and Green Day, like were you aware of shows happening at that point? Had you started like
There was there was a local scene in Burbank that I didn't really get into though until like, you know, I was maybe a couple of years after that. Like I wasn't really aware of it. There were people around um, that skateboarded, that had tattoos,
Mhm.
that I saw around that were clearly in bands, but I was too young to
Got it.
know that type of stuff. And you know, like when you're that age, like 2 years is
Huge.
like it's a millennium,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So like from the time from like sixth grade, yeah, I wasn't going to any shows, and then by the time eighth grade rolls around, it's like I've been to 25 local shows, and I'm like all into seeing the bands, and I know every band that's
Yeah,
going
yeah,
around.
yeah.
So like, yeah, in that middle school period was like discovering like, oh, there's a scene here, there's like bands, and there's stuff going on, and like um I feel pretty lucky because there actually was like interesting music happening. You know, like there was like metal bands and there were hardcore bands and there were like a lot of, especially at the time, there was a lot of like street punk and like that type of stuff was really big at the time.
Mhm.
So you could always just go to like whatever local punk show was going on
Yeah.
or whatever. And yeah, that was kind of my introduction to like the local scene. And then there was a band from Burbank called Bleeding Kansas that to me they were like the coolest band because they had, you know, gone on tour and, you know, played with like Cursed and Breathe or Resist and stuff like that, and they recorded with Kurt Ballou.
I
And
remember.
so
What label were they on? Do you remember?
their LP was on Abacus.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
And that was pretty late. But before that, they had a couple 7 inches and some splits and stuff like that that were on like DIY labels and
Mhm.
all that type of stuff.
Okay. I remember the band name very like vividly. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, they toured and, you know, they played with a lot of the like screamo type
Yeah.
world. Yeah, they were like definitely part of that type of stuff. So they were like really inspirational, you know, at that age, like just seeing like, oh, they could play with the bands that I buying CDs of at the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So what
yeah.
what year did you start going to shows? I'm just trying
Probably,
to.
yeah. I probably really started going to shows in like 2002, something like that.
Yeah. So what was the Burbank like? Were there clubs or was it like
VFW?
hall?
Yeah, VFW hall. Basically, there's a VFW hall. There was a Moose Lodge, similar type of thing, that did shows for a little bit. And then I don't know how, but I would convince my parents to drop me off at the Smell downtown.
Ooh, back then that is
Wow.
Which is crazy. I talk to my parents about it now, and they're like, I don't know why we would do that, but we would. I used to go to the Smell all the time.
Oh, 'cause now it's like what whatever.
Oh yeah, it's nothing
But
now.
back then that place was sketch.
Yes. And yeah, I started going there probably like 13, 14 years old, and you learn a lot. Like you learn a lot about the world going down there and like what the realities of life are away from the suburb of Burbank where you grow up, and then you see a lot of really interesting, cool music. So I was exposed to a lot of cool like noise music and dance music and like stuff that like I wouldn't have ever been exposed to because I was, you know, the typical punk kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the Smell was like this interesting place where like punk was this super open thing. Like synth bands were considered punk and everything, you know, like No Age was kind of starting to go around that time and Mika Miko and like they were like so like it wasn't the type of punk that I thought of as punk, but that like really expanded my palette and expanded my mind, and like so I really love the smell, and that whole scene at that time was actually really cool. And at the time too, like Bleeding Kansas played there with Hot Cross, in 2000.
Oh, okay.
Like there were still those type of shows going on.
So so you mentioned like there were like metal bands and hardcore bands playing together and stuff. Was that typical for most shows, like where it would be,
Yeah, of course, like the ska band and the metal band and the indie band or whatever all playing.
I sort of wish that stuff still happened, because it was there's like this innocence to it where it's like everybody's just there to enjoy this subculture, right? Everyone's come from the same kind of background, and yet all these different bands can play together. You don't really see that much anymore. But I think with the younger kids who might be in like middle school or high school right now, I wonder if that's still going on.
I think there probably is, like, and also I think there's more acceptance of mixing genres in music too. Like then I feel like it would be like one kid's like, I want to start a ska band, and he gets the only musicians he knows to do that, and then a couple of them realize they like metal, so they start a metal band together,
Right.
Whereas like now, like people are more open to the idea of what we all thought was dumb when we were kids, of like, oh, let's have a ska song and a metal song or whatever. Like there's so much more blending of music, I feel like, now than there was then. But no, I mean, it was a very innocent, cool time, and like for that type of stuff, like you're saying, like that it's the most pure time of music that you really have,
Yeah, that's true. That now that I'm reflecting back on kind of a couple of the interviews that we've done already, and it is really innocent time, because there's no set conventions put into place where you're like, oh, we got to play this gear, or we got to sound this heavy, we got to tune like this, or whatever. You're just kind of doing you. It's kind of like you're finding yourself anyways, But now you have music, and you have, if you want to be a musician, then you got to figure out, oh, am I going to play drums? Am I going to play bass? Am I going to play guitar?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Finding your identity through that, I guess. So I guess, like, what was, did you start, well, first of all, you said your dad played music. What kind of stuff did he play when he was on, like, piano stuff?
He's a really good jazz piano player. He doesn't really do much of it anymore. It's funny, like now he's committed probably like the last 20 years of his life to like banjo and mandolin and being like a bluegrass player.
Awesome. Yeah.
He's really good. I mean, he's dedicated so much time to it now. But so yeah, there was mostly, honestly, I was like, there was a lot of like folk music, like that type of stuff was around a lot, and the Beatles, like that's a kind of constant.
That's cool.
And so yeah, and like watching music and singing and stuff like that, and like listening to music together, like that was always.
That's cool. Yeah.
So what was the gear that you were pulling from your dad?
Yeah, exactly. I was just pulling from my dad, exactly. He had but the cool thing about that is that he had like cool stuff, so he had a Mustang, like a 60s Mustang that he had bought in the 60s that he had kept the whole time. And I loved that guitar, and that was kind of the first guitar when I was like really starting to play. Before that, I had like a Squire Strat or whatever, and that guitar was great too. Like I really never had a problem with it. But then the Mustang, eventually, once I was like starting to play like hardcore music and like figure out the style of stuff I wanted to play, it like didn't really fit what I wanted to do anymore. And so then pretty early into being in bands, like in high school, I got a that's right. Then I was borrowing my dad. My dad also got a Stratocaster, like just a regular Mexican Stratocaster. And so I borrowed that for quite some time. And a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe was kind of my first like tube amp. Before that, I had a little Roland
Is it the cube kind of thing?
Kind of like a cube, but it was like a keyboard amp. And because like I had some knowledge of playing the piano, so like I would like play keyboard sometimes in whatever bands we were doing. So I had this little like kind of keyboard amp that I would play guitar in.
Okay.
Into and stuff like that. And then my dad was like, you should, you can use this. You can borrow my Hot Rod Deluxe.
That's so awesome. I'm so envious of you right now because it's like my parents had no idea. So I had like the worst gear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was what was like your first show, first band? Like what?
Yeah, okay. My first like real show was the band was called Mangy Mutt.
Mangy Mutt. Nice.
Mangy Mutt. And we were really into like the weirdo Modest Mouse stuff, like the early Modest Mouse stuff and like that type of stuff. So it was like noisy and weird and
I'm happy
no, because we didn't have the skill to be bad. Like it was very like avant-garde. Let's say.
With Math Rock, I always wondered like because there was like I grew up in like the Richmond punk scene, so there's a lot of that was big. Like there was like Sleepy Time Trios, Band Max.
Right. Yeah.
Like
I forgot about that.
And it was always like this question of like are they really, really talented, or is it just everybody's kind of failing in sync with each other?
Yeah.
But sounding good.
No, I think that's what we were doing, but not in a mathy way. We were just like experimenting, and we were really into like Sonic Youth and stuff like that, and like we were like into being avant-garde specifically. But there was a communist info shop in Echo Park that we played with a band called Le Shock. Not Le Shock. They were called Le Joshua, not Le Shock, a different one, Le Joshua, from Torrance, who were a really cool punk band. And they were kind of like, I guess I probably say Le Shock because they wore outfits, they had like the matching outfits, and they turned off all the lights, and they were like one of those type of bands.
Yeah.
So that was my first like real show, and I think I was probably 14, somewhere around there, like freshman year of high school.
Okay. That's good.
And yeah, and all the bands, they were older, but people I knew from honestly from going to the Smelt and stuff like that. And there was a local band in Burbank called My Little Red Toe, who were like a 2-piece indie, like in that kind of K Records realm type of thing. And I knew them, they were older. And so like through them and their friends, that's how we got the show type of thing. And then, like battles at the band started doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
But somehow knew, and I don't remember if someone ever told me or like if I knew in my heart, but we never did the pay to play thing. I never have done a pay to play show in my life. Like anything like that. I knew instinctually maybe that just like that circuit sucks, and like just like I don't care about that. Like I don't,
that was a new thing which I didn't realize until I started playing in like not hardcore bands and just kind of playing for people who needed a guitar player. And some people were like, "Yeah, this is like a pay for." I was like, "Wait, what?" And it's like that just never existed.
Oh, it was definitely around. It was
really?
more of like, so it like in playing in metal band, like metal hardcore bands, like there would be like metal tours and definitely like playing venues that were like, I brought it up before, like Jack's in Northern Virginia, where it's like these holdover venues that, clearly the heyday was like 80s, hard rock,
hair metal
type venues where they weren't making the money that they were, and I don't know if they were doing the pay to play thing in the 80s as well, but it was definitely more commonplace. Because when Darkest Hour was like touring on like the first like bigger just like first metal tour that we went out on, there was like so many opening bands like that were selling tickets, and it was just such a bummer to see that there's so many VFW halls, and like it's like you shouldn't have to pay to play ever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah,
reason.
exactly. And I think, yeah, by the time that I was into punk and stuff, like I kind of had already knew like, oh, the whiskey is like washed, you know, like that, like it's
Or
not
the
cool.
Piper, too. It's like,
Yeah, or whatever. Like you couldn't even play there because that's a bar,
oh yeah.
you know. But like the whiskey, they had a ton of local shows and like local band showcases, and like, you know, the more tickets you sell, the higher up you are on the bill, or like whatever stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I always avoided that. That was always I don't know how lucky that I avoided that pitfall.
No, I mean, it's like, I think a lot of it does happen where, well, I think we're lucky enough to get into a subculture that kind of picks up on it really quick. Like, you're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
that's just fucking bogus, you know? But there's a lot of people who do bands and just like, well, how did you guys tour? And how do you guys do this? And it's just like, we just did it, you know? It's like, you know, I played a lot of fucking shows in front of 4 people, you know? But,
Exactly.
you know?
And like you just make it happen however you have to, you know. And like in California, like that usually ends up being house shows and stuff like that. And so then like, you know, as I got like to the end of high school, and that became the primary way that we were playing shows, was like house show stuff.
Yeah, we always talk about house shows being some of the best shows.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And we just talk about like, oh shit, yeah, remember you go to that fucking show and they don't have a PA, so someone uses the bass amp as a vocal PA.
Yes.
And it's just fucking play.
Yeah. Exactly. And you just fail your way to learning how to actually throw a show, you know, because you're just doing it and then you don't know, and then you're like, oh right, the PA, shit, you know, whatever. And then the next time, you know, you gotta have everything right.
Yeah.
So,
And it's interesting because now you guys, Touche, is at a level where you guys are doing a lot of big stuff. So, you know, some people like watching. I think someone had actually put a comment up, like, "Oh, thanks. You know, listening to your podcast has really kind of given me a look into how stuff actually, like, how you can go to play shows and what happens and all that stuff." But a lot of it is just, you just gotta do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And, one thing, like, Fred and I always talk about, and a couple other people that we used to play, you know, shows with, in each town we had our own like gear, right? Like Chicago had its gear, Richmond had its gear, DC had their stuff, and then like you'd see a band that come through town, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I'm gonna sell all my stuff and then get that because I want to sound like that, right?
Yeah.
So for like Chicago, I've said this before, it's like, for us it was like when Unbroken comes through town, we see them playing Fender M80s, like solid state amps, and we're just everyone just threw them out, and we got those Fender M80s. We're like, yes, you know, and then everyone also changed the way they dressed for like forever after that, you know?
Yeah.
Was there a band like that for you?
The band I had mentioned, Bleeding Kansas, like once I started going to their shows, like being more involved in like the hardcore scene and stuff like that, you know, they were into playing like Marshall JMPs and JCM 800s, and they had really good taste in stuff. And so, yeah, that was kind of the blueprint of what I thought a really good band sounded like, for sure, was like cool shit. But because I had been exposed to Fender amps, I always liked it. Like, even the first time I ever tried a Hot Rod Deluxe, I remember I was just like, oh, this is kind of what I've been searching for. Even using the channel gain, you know, like the yellow channel, you press the button or whatever.
It's a great amp. Yeah.
It's a great amp, and I've actually ended up using a newer one for Touche at times. I bring one on the road as a backup. Like, it's just a great amp. So it's like that amp's followed me my whole life.
What's your rig right now? Like
a twin reverb.
Okay.
So yeah, I was always drawn to just like the sound of like the lush, big Fender sound in a way to me, because like whenever I hear Marshalls, it's like they would cut so good and they sounded so good, but Fender sounded like bigger to me. There was something like lush about it that I was always like really drawn to, and then so then when I really like honed in on like, oh, I want to start like a hardcore band, you know, I want to do like something like Majority Rule, like had just broken up, and like I was, you know, into that type of stuff, right? So then like I wanted stuff that was like more atmospheric and stuff like that, and I was into like mono and Godspeed You Black Emperor, and like all that type of stuff. And I actually saw in, I think I was like 16 or something, and I saw mono at the Troubadour, and they had twin reverbs.
Really?
And that was it. And that was it. That was it for me. Like at that moment, I was just like, that's what I have to have.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sound I'd been looking for forever. It was so fucking loud. You know, it was just so ear-piercingly loud.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is what I've been searching for forever. So I had a job, and so I bought a twin reverb off of Craigslist. And I remember thinking it was like crazy. I was going to buy an amp for $400 or something like that. You know, it's just
that's
like,
how much you got it for?
Oh yeah, they weren't. They weren't.
Like, oh yeah. That's how much
they weren't. They just like weren't popular.
Yeah.
You know, at the time. I mean, and like I look back at some of the stuff that I bought and sold at that time too. Like, so I had that, and then Touche started. So I had that, and I was in a band that was kind of majority rule-ish, kind of hardcore sort of thing, and so I was playing twin reverb, and that band was going until Touche started, and there was a little bit of overlap in between.
Mm-hmm.
And when Touche started, I was playing the twin, and I still liked it, but I wanted maybe more of the like 4x12 cabinet sound, you know, just more of the I guess whatever.
You want that kind of
move some more
air.
More, yeah. Because it's not a loud issue. It was just more of a like, you know, whatever. So then I ended up like buying a V4, which again, like I got that V4 for like $500, you know, and then that thing which I loved, I had the sound of that thing was probably the best amp I've ever had still to this day.
I've actually recorded with that amp multiple times, and I think, and I played actually guitar through it and bass through it. Mm-hmm. They're fucking incredible.
Yeah.
They're so heavy. It's like
so heavy, and it broke all the time.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I ended up, you know, a few years into it, talking to a tech that I trusted, and he was like, you just like can't use this all the time. Like these amps are, the reason it sounds good is because like the something about the wiring in this is really badly done, but it's what gives it its special charm. Wow. And so that's why it's never been able to be replicated again. Like even if you get the master volume ones that are more reliable, or the reissue ones, like they sound good, but it's nothing like those original non-master volume V4s. Like they're so special, but they're made like shit, and they break down all the time. So and then I ended up just going back to the twin and finding like more of a pedal combination that worked for what I wanted, and building my sound a little more around that. But you know, there was stuff in between. Like I really fell in love with Sovtex for a while, and bought and sold every Sovtech, which I still love too. I mean, just a phenomenal amp. But
which Sovtech were you using? The MiG 50?
So I got the 100,
okay.
Which I really liked. But then a friend, like me and a few friends were like all in on them. So we were like snatching up everyone, and you could get them for $300.
I know.
They were nothing then.
And so we were $1,200 right now.
I know, it's unbelievable. And so like I had this 100, I really liked it. My friend got a 50. Once I heard his 50, that was it. I needed the 50.
That amp
done with the 100.
Incredible.
So I got the 50. Then for a while in Touche, I actually played two 50s.
Oh, really?
One 4x12, like as like a little stereo cab thing.
Oh,
and then eventually bought and sold those, and regret not having one of those 50s around now, because that thing is awesome.
Yes,
and even the 100 is great. Like I have a friend who has the 60 that is great if you're playing high gain.
Got it.
Like, really cool rock and roll amp kind of thing.
The 50 is very reminiscent of the JCM 800.
But see, to me, the difference with JCM 800s, at least with Touche, I could never play a JCM 800 because the high end was so like piercing, and It doesn't work with single coil pickups the same in at least in Touche. Like there has to be this high end, but it's like hard to explain, but there's a specific frequency of high end that I like, and there's one that I don't like. And Marshalls, when I'm playing the types of chords we're playing in Touche, they bring out this thing that neither Nick and I both were the same. It's like, if for whatever reason we can't play Marshalls, they just don't work for our sound.
I mean, I was just gonna say that your Touche is probably the band that when I see live and even recorded, you guys have your tone down like more than many bands that I've seen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Like, you guys know what you're doing, but it's also like all the pedal combinations, and because I think you have like what you just said, the Fenders are just fucking shine, man, and you guys really fucking shine. But
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, and I love the American amp sound. Like I love 6L6s and 6550s, and like they just produce the type of high end that I'm really into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't even know what we were talking about.
Oh, just like, well, we were talking about the Big 50 too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like, I feel like the tone was definitely, it was almost like a hybrid between like a Fender and a Marshall.
That's exactly it. That's exactly
where it
has more darkness and it's a little less bright and like sizzly than a Marshall, but it's a beautiful in between of those two amps. Really is.
Back then they were so cheap.
They were so cheap. I remember like they used to be at this like local like pawn shop that turned into like a crazy place to find just great finds in Chicago called Midwest Buy and Sell. And you just go in there and just be like a soft deck, 2 or 3 soft decks sitting there for like $250, right? Everyone's like, who the hell wants this? You know, and I was like, at that time I didn't fucking know, you know? And I was like, fuck. And now, like, a friend who had just got one, an older one that he got for cheap, like OfferUp. Some dude didn't know what he was selling. And it was a 50 watt. And I'd never heard it. And I was like, holy shit, this thing sounds amazing. And I was like, fuck. And I'm looking for him like $1,200. But apparently, Electro Harmonics just reissued the Softex. Except with their name on, you know, like, but I haven't played them, so I don't know how good they are.
It's funny, like the Softex always sticks out to me just because like that was my like growing up, like I discovered gear through like I subscribed to all of the catalogs and stuff like Musician's Friend and
Sweetwater,
American Music Supply. You know, this is well before Sweetwater. But I mean same thing. It was pre-internet, so there wasn't really anything to like see what anything sounded like. It was just based on like, and my mentality then was like, oh, well, you know, Marshalls are, you know, they were still, you know, like in the $1,000 range.
Yeah, expensive.
At that time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I was like, all right, so that's what a good amp costs. And then I see like the Softex, and they were, you know, like $500-$600 new at the time. And I was just like, oh, well, that's got to be crappy. And like, but then it was
you don't have
like
that.
The whole decision, like thought process was like informed by Marshall good, $1,500. Softex must be bad, you know, $500. And then later when I was doing a recording at a studio that had one sitting there, I was just like, I'll plug into this, see what it sounds like. I was just blown away. And I think that's something like, and I don't know if kids run into that now, like starting out, like thinking that, you know, oh, this super expensive thing must be the best thing ever. It's kind of like, actually going out and playing all of these amps and like going out and then not having any like preconceived notion of they're going to sound like, and just let your ears inform what's good. I mean, not the market.
I think, I don't know if you have a philosophy or anything like that, but for me personally, I can't spend over like $1,000 on gear at all. Like I just don't, for me, it's just like, you know, I just don't have the, I guess the nuance to be like, oh, I'm gonna get this like super high-end boutique amp for $2,500, and then I got this like Fender, you know, or like maybe even the Hot Rod Deluxe, and I was like, this thing sounds fucking bitchin'.
It does. Yeah, I would say overall, like my philosophy is more aligned with that. It's like a utilitarian approach, like that especially when you tour a lot, you end up being like, I need something that I can replicate as much as possible, and that kind of becomes the goal. Like that's become my goal later. Like it was like for years it was like discovery, and it's like I'm buying amps and I'm selling them and I'm trying new pedal combinations, and every tour is a new rig from the ground up. You know what I mean? Like I just like it's like I get back from tour and I sell everything and I build a whole new rig. Like that was what I went through for some years for sure. Because it's like this works, this breaks, but I've discovered so many things and like bought and sold so many pedals and amps and whatever. And now my approach in the last, I don't know, 6-7 years has been like, what is easy for me to replicate that I really like the sound of, and like I can be like consistent and feel really good about what I'm playing, and I try to take that like I'm saying, like a more utilitarian type approach to gear in general. When it comes to spending money on gear, like I'm cool to spend a little more if it's worth it. Amps in general, I'm more of a clean palette guy anyway. So for me, it was like, I'm not a blues player who relies on the natural breakup of the amp and the subtle like compression that gives you and rolling off the volume and like that. That's a different player, you know. For me, it's like I need loud, clean, and then I control the rest from there. And I kind of like, you know, that's my little space for me to, you know, and then even within that, I've tried to even be like, what can I have that if everything were to go wrong, the least amount of stuff that I need to possibly do what I need to do to get through. Like your mindset becomes so different with that stuff. So that is more my approach generally these days, is like being practical and being like, that, and it, either band too, like with Entry, I generally try and play with just guitar into the amp, not even a tuning pedal. Like literally just like it's just like just tune right before the set and we play for 12 minutes. Like I don't want anything. it's not worth putting anything in line. Just
what do you play in Entry? What amp do you play in Entry?
I've played a JMP the whole time.
Okay.
But I just fell in love with, so our bass player has the Yamaha T100 combo. It's like the 1x12 80s. You familiar with these amps? Yeah, designed by Soldano.
That's what I'm picturing the faceplate on that thing.
Yes, so there's the big rack mount head.
Yep.
They also made a 1x12 combo called the 100C. So he got one of those, and we've been recording recently, and I used it, and I was like, man, this thing sounds killer. Really liked it. And then our most recent show, like literally last weekend, I borrowed it for the show, and I was like, I have to have it. I don't care what I have to do. I have to get it. So I have one coming in the mail any day now that I bought. I put it out to everyone I know on the internet, like, I need one of these, like, and someone helped me find one. So really excited about that. And it's a really unique amp too. Like the clean channel is also kind of amazing.
Is it
like,
tube?
Yep. Oh yeah. It's 100-watt tube, tube reverb.
Oh, okay.
And it's cool. Actually, I started to do a little more research about it and like read this hilarious interview with Mike Soldano where he's like, it's like 20 years after or something like that. And they're asking him about it. And he's like, oh, I love those things. And he's like, they paid me so much money to make whatever amp I wanted.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's like, I had to use like one Yamaha part for the reverb. And that was the only thing that they made me use. Other than that, so, I mean, it's basically a Soldano SLO that, you know, and you can still find them out there for like $700-800.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
So,
yeah, take that.
Well, yeah, a little steal for like I would say it's kind of, I mean, it's very high gain. It's kind of 5150-ish.
Yeah.
Where it has the really like tight bottom end and like low mids sort of thing going on. but it's a little trashier than a 5150. Like, it's not as like smooth sounding or something.
Yeah, that's when you're talking about like, you know, you got to use what kind of works, you know, like that's my workhorse was the 5150, the first generation one. And I got $300, and that thing was just a powerhouse. Like, is it something that I'm like, yeah, it's fucking perfect? No. Like, I actually don't think I've used it on any recording of even like any of the bands that I've played in.
Oh, really?
Heavy wise, yeah.
That's surprising.
But it's an amp that just live delivers every time. Like, I don't have to like sit there and tweak anything too much. It's just like plug in, I have a tuner, noise gate, go. You know, because on like live recordings, I'm using like either like a Marshall, I've used a Trainer, I've used Bad Cat. You know, so it was a different high watt, which is one of the most amazing amps I've ever played. But yeah, the high gain, I mean, the 5150 is just a workhorse. And then
It really is.
And then the rectifier too, which I have a rack mount rectifier, which I was using for a while. I know everyone's like, dude, it's just, you know, if it ain't broke, why didn't you deal with it? I'm just like, I'm not a rectifier fan, but it gets the job done, you know?
I was actually really turned on to the rectifier by Nick. So before he played guitar in Touche, he played bass, and before that, he was a guitar player always. But he was in bands like years before that where the rectifier was the most popular type of amp going at the time, right? Whatever. And so then when he started playing guitar in the band, he just had I think a triple rec actually, that he had from, 6-7 years ago, and he was in like a metalcore type of band.
Uh-huh.
And man, the clean channel is so good, like
Really?
so good. And then
It's got so much headroom.
Oh, yeah.
it's got so much header. It's basically just a clean amp. Like, if you just use the clean channel, it's a 100-watt 6L6 monster. And so I have occasionally, for backline purposes, like when it's a Marshall or a dual rec, give me the dual rec clean channel all day.
Really?
All day. It's one of my little like secret backline. Like, I prefer the clean channel on any Mesa amp than I would to play any Marshall playing in Touche, at least. Like, I need that.
Mesa kind of evolved from Fender style. Like, it was more of an American
Yeah, and
style.
I didn't realize that until I started playing them, and then you realize, hey, yeah, you look at like the combos and the boogie stuff is like, oh yeah, they're like modded bassements, or the original like boogie combos, those were like deluxe reverbs that were modded, stuff like that. So all that stuff evolves from that. So I realized, like, oh, it doesn't have to be a high gain amp. Like, if you just don't use that part of it, to actually
I'm gonna try that, because I've never tried. I'm gonna try that, and right now I'm looking for something that's like a clean palette to run.
Dude,
run,
give
like,
it a shot, man. It's really, really clean. Like you can't make it break up.
Because I just like never used it, and I was in like a kind of power pop band in Chicago, and I was using that all the time because I was able to roll the gain off of it and not get it so squishy and crunchy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a one-trick pony. At least that's what I thought. But now I'm gonna try checking it out with a clean tone.
You know who I noticed in the last few years uses it is the guitar player in Guided by Voices.
Really?
And it sounds so good. Like, so good with just like Strat into dual rectifier.
Okay. Yeah, I was playing a Telly into a dual rectifier for a while, and that sounded pretty good. Yeah. It's when you got because for a while, like early on, when I got the rectifier, I got it for really cheap from a friend. I was doing EMG 81s into a Mesa, and it was just over like high gain, just saturation, way too much.
Yeah. That was funny, because I remember like early Darkest Hour recordings, like we would always, there was like two camps. There was like the DC amp camp, which was like modeled after Damnation AD, like band from DC, which is like a turbo rat into an 800, and then like
sick tone. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like every time they play Chicago, everyone's like, oh, out with the M80. Now everyone's getting JCM 800 to the rat pedal.
And then there was like I had a door rectifier and 81s in Gibson, and when we go in to record, AB the two guitar tones, and like in the mix, it was just like you couldn't tell the difference between the two of them.
Yeah.
So it's just like I don't know how much it really matters, but it's like you kind of sound like yourself no matter.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more about that. Like, I really truly believe like somewhere between 80 and 90% of your tone is your right hand. And like I really do believe that, because like you hear someone who's a special guitar player like plug into any practice amp and play a beautiful riff, you're going to like feel it, and you're going to feel that it sounds great just because it's played well, you know? So like I do really firmly believe that it really is like you can find these subtleties, and sometimes the search is like it's not even about finding something. It's just it sparks the thing that makes you play the way that you need to play.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's less about even getting that actual tone, but whatever inspires you to play and inspires you to feel connected to it in that moment, like that's what it's really all about. Like, you could nitpick forever and you could do whatever, but like it's just finding that thing that actually inspires you, which is I think why people are on this, everyone is on the endless gear journey, because it's not even about, there is no end point.
No, you're right.
You have to find a new way to spark creativity, and sometimes that is just by like throwing out the old and bringing in the new, just because it has something different that sparked something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that happens with pedals, like you got this new pedal and you're like, oh my God, I wrote this riff that I would not have written if I wasn't playing around with this pedal that just, it could even be, it's more of a fuzz pedal than it is a distortion overdrive pedal, and it just like changes the way you play, changes the way you kind of approach it. It's like a paintbrush, it's like, how are you going to create, so different tools that you use. And I think that's just how kind of your sound, the way that you might write for a band. And a lot of times bands are shaped, by the writers mostly, but then you got some pieces of gear that are like, oh shit, this is the guitar that I wrote this riff on. Or like, I'm a big Queen fan, so when I found out that Brian May plays with quarters, not a pick, that's what gives him his unique tone. When I was like, oh shit, the dude plays with like quarters or like, coins.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're not gonna be able to replicate him, obviously, because of that. And he built his own guitar too, I think. It's like
apparently pickups.
Yeah. So it's just, I think it's a whole nother part of being a musician. I think it's just very, very different.
So that said, like, so you've got you're playing through the twins for Touche. Like, what are like the critical pedals? Like, you're going on a fly date or any like what's the
so the thing that like clicked early in Touche was a clean amp, and then I had the yellow Boss OS2, which is the overdrive / distortion, and it has one of the knobs is just like how much overdrive and how much distortion, right? You can like blend the two sounds. And I had never tried just the overdrive. Once I was keyed into like what overdrive is as opposed to like distortion, it's like, oh, again, like it was like that moment, like, oh my God, this is what I've been searching for forever. Yeah. And so overdrive is like I have to have overdrive. That's the key thing that I need. And overdrive and a touch of reverb. And every Touche guitar track you'll ever hear essentially has reverb on it. Like really? We almost never have a moment that is completely dry. Like,
oh, interesting.
Everything has just a touch of reverb on it, especially live. Like in the studio, maybe we'll dry things up a little bit here and there, but you'll never see us play live where the reverb's off for a second. Like, there's always a trail, and I love that sound. And so I need reverb, I need overdrive, and then and so the overdrive thing is kind of like shifted through the years. It's like I loved this OS2. That was
great pedal.
I still love that pedal. It's a phenomenal pedal. It's so usable. But then found the Rat and found that you could really do different stuff with the Rat. Like you could, it's awesome low gain, it's awesome high gain, you know. And I would like play around with it. Like for this song, I'll turn up the gain a little more, or something like that. I kind of fell in love with the Rat.
Filtering
on that
really
thing
cool.
is so
Oh my god! And now even more than ever, I'm like in love with the Rat because of the filter and being so many usable tones like all over the place in that thing. But by happenstance, I broke one. The first day we went on our first like full U.S. tour, opening for Thursday.
Mhm.
First show, I break the pedal mid set, but it's like I think it was like I was able to get through the set because it was like always on, like I couldn't turn it off, you know, that type of thing. So I got through the set, but the next day I was like, okay, I need to buy something. So I walked into a guitar store in Portland, and I was like, hey, I need an overdrive pedal, but I've been playing a Rat, but you have so much stuff here. I'm like kind of open to anything. Like in that moment, I just felt kind of open. And he was like, gave me a couple things, but specifically it was like, try this out. And it was the full drive, the full tone, full drive 2, the blue, the MOSFET.
Yeah.
And that has been like my signature sound ever since then. Like I've always played that. And so that pedal and reverb, and then for a long time, for Nick and I both, it was the carbon copy MXR. Like those three things, that and still to this day, I could probably get through any set with those three. You know, as long as I have those, I could get through any Touche set. But now that's evolved a little bit because we developed an overdrive pedal with this company called Electronic Audio Experiments. And so it's called the Limelight Pedal. And so Nick and I both play that, and it's a kind of similar to the full drive in that it's a boost and an overdrive, but the boost is its own, you know, they're separate. But and the boost comes first because that's another thing that we always did was boost first, or just always have boost on. That was a trick I came across later, a few years in. Like, oh shit, that's what I always wanted to boost, always on. It just makes your pickup sound a little fuller, bigger. Like, just gives you fatter sound, I guess. And also, I love the way it reacts. It makes your pedals react stronger. Like
you put the boost in front of the pedal chain? I mean, the first thing in the pedal chain?
It's very first. Yeah. Boost is first, and it's always on. And then it goes into overdrive and distortion. But so we developed this pedal together with this guy, and we ended up having a great thing where we talked for a couple months, basically through email, about like pedals we liked and what we liked about them, what we didn't like about them, and like, you know, Nick was always into like the more like modded tube screamer type of thing. And so he actually developed a circuit from scratch that isn't a clone of anything, based on all the stuff we had talked about. And then he sent us a prototype. We brought it on the road, and Nick and I every night switched off playing it.
Got it.
And we're able to like fine tune some small details about it, and then sent it back and went back and forth a little bit, and then we brought it into the studio for our last record, and it made every guitar track just because, you know, whether it was just the boost or the overdrive and the boost together, like it just ended up working for everything. Like, so that is now I gotta have it, you know, go to.
That's rad to get the opportunity to do that. That's great.
Yeah, no, it was like really exciting. And, you know, the fact that it was its own circuit and not just like, you know, most people just do some version of like, oh, it's a modded tube screamer, or it's a Rat but with a bass boost, or, you know, there's all these like, which are clone, you know, there's all these like typical sort of clones that people end up doing, which I love a lot of that stuff, but I was really proud of like that this thing was developed from the ground up. Even, it wasn't even for us as much as I was just like, I just can't believe you came up with this, and that you were able to like take what we said and then electrically figure it out, and he's just like a genius. This guy John, who runs the company. He has Boston.
Boston. Okay.
Yeah, and he's I think a few years younger than me even. So he's a pretty young guy, and he has a doctorate in electrical engineering.
Okay.
And so it does like consulting for other pedal companies and stuff like that. Really interesting person. But yeah, so that has become my like gotta have that. Is if I have that and a twin, even if I don't have a second overdrive, I can make anything work as long as I have that. And I've actually designed my pedal board now to where that and a tuner are out essentially its own chain, and then all of the effects, including like distortion, two different delays, chorus, reverb, are all in a loop or in a looper.
Okay.
So that worst case scenario, if everything fails, it's just the Limelight directly into the amp. Because I can always just make that work. I can always take anything out. Then with the looper, I can just take it out of the chain completely.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's an interesting way to do it. That's cool. Yeah. What is do you use the reverb on the amp? Or are
so now, as of this record, I have switched to using a little bit of. I used a Holy Grail forever.
It's great.
Which is the best. Love it. But what I ended up on the last record, more of the reverb I got was more of the like, I would say 80s rack reverb, like really ethereal type of stuff. So I ended up getting a Mr. Black Eterna, which is just crazy. If you guys aren't familiar, it's unbelievable. It's like, it has like the longest, most angelic full reverb, like I said, very 80s rack reverb, just like endless,
like an Alesis, basically the small Alesis machines.
That's what it reminds me of, like and so I use a little bit of reverb on the amp for that, like I said, like the always on reverb, and then that is like my now, like if I'm going big reverb, like that, it's like kind of I have two reverb options.
That's cool.
I need the like super reverbed out clean one, and then I just need just like the little hint of like the reverb version of Slapback.
Oh yeah, okay.
So are you always playing single coils, or do you kind of mix it up?
Always playing single coils. Every album we bust out some guitar that doesn't have single coils, and it never makes it. Except for the only one that has made it on the last couple of records is Nick has one of those Fender hollow body, not the Coronata.
Starcaster, is that the one?
Starcaster, yes. He has a Starcaster that has humbuckers in it, and that works for whatever reason.
That's a really good guitar.
Really good guitar.
The Tim Shaw, like the split pole piece.
Yeah, it's the reissue one that it was from a few years ago. Yeah. So that has made it, but then other than that, it's just between Nick and I, we kind of have just like an army of Strats, Telecasters, Jaguars, and Jazzmasters.
Oh, okay, full Fender.
All four of those get used live and on record.
Okay.
And I would say primarily both of us. Well, I would say for me, it's Stratocaster and Telecaster. And for Nick, it's usually Telecaster and Jazzmaster. And Jazzmaster would probably be where he would lean a little more.
Yeah, I mean, all great guitars. And now that you're telling me, we're talking about your tone stuff, like, and just knowing your band, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. And, you guys have that really shimmery, but also it's a really unique and great sounding tone. So
thanks. Yeah, I think the Telecaster was a big one for us that we discovered pretty early in the band. Like oh shit, Telecasters like really sound awesome for everything. They super cool. And then later I've come back to the Strat, and it's been this like it's just a love affair for me. I can't get enough of it. I really can't. Like on the last record, like most of it for me was a Stratocaster. Like probably 80% of my guitar tracks ended up just being a Nash Stratocaster with Lollers in it that
The Lawler pickups are insane.
oh my god. Yeah, so that I've just totally fallen in love with like the middle positions of the Strat and like getting more into just the not always being on the bridge pickup all the time. Which is
What are these
90% of my guitar playing has just been like I don't touch any of this stuff. It's just always up, always on the bridge. And I've only in the last couple of years really started messing around with like, oh, the neck pickup or the middle.
Yeah, I love the middle pickup on the. I have a Tele Deluxe.
Oh yeah.
The middle pickup on that is fucking so good. Even though they're humbuckers, but it sounds.
Yeah.
And I
My
just
dad-
get the same sound out of a Gibson. You know, even though I Gibsons are like the guitars I usually go to, but lately I've been playing a lot more Fenders for sure. I have a Tele that I've been playing, and a Tele out of like a high gain amp actually sounds pretty good.
Really good. Yeah. Telecasters are so underrated for their versatility. Like people think of them as these country guitars, but like they're really they're as utilitarian as a Strat could be, in my opinion. And in a way, Strat has more of a signature sound to me. Like I can pick out a Strat usually quicker on a recording than I can a Telecaster.
Okay.
Well, like the first time I was like blown away that a band was using Telecasters was like the first show Refuse played in the U.S.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
they showed up. It was like Earth Crisis, Snapcase, Refused, and they come out and it's just all Telecasters, and it was the heaviest. Like, I mean, they were just going off for one, but then like it sounded so amazing, and that was what they had recorded with too. On the songs, yeah. So that victory record, I was just like,
when they showed up at
Telecasters.
Yeah, when they showed up at Telly's, I was just like, wait, what? And then they started playing. I was like, holy shit!
I remember having that moment, seeing just photos even of Converge playing, and he was playing a Rickenbacker.
Kurt's played Rickenbacker for a long
I
time.
just was like, what? Like it just seemed crazy to me. And then I really wanted one, but they're so expensive.
Yeah.
You know, so that was just like not attainable.
Yeah.
Ever. But still really fascinating that for that band he would use a Rickenbacker in that era. It seems like it wouldn't work. Again, that's what we're talking about with like it's Kurt. That's what it's the riffs and it's the guy playing. It's so much more than it's the guitar, but clearly found. And I remember even reading like he's someone I learned tips from in interviews. Like when you read his interviews, I remember him talking about like that the way he would make the gain sound better was to turn up the mids more and just give you more and more mids. And he would say he would crank the mids to 10 on like Marshalls or whatever.
Okay.
And then it's like, oh, right. Okay, that's what, you know. So then that turned me on to that trick. And then it's funny now later I'm actually like I roll off the mids. I go with the like traditional clean sound.
Yeah.
But it was an important step for me to understanding like the type of distortion and the type of overdrive that I was like leaning towards and how I could actually get that sound.
Yeah.
Without necessarily adding more distortion. It was like the mids, the more of that's giving you that crunch. That's what you're looking for, whatever. Yeah.
I always thought it was take out the mids. It's the bass and it's the treble, and it's
there were so many
Injustice for All.
I mean, there were so many bands. It's like, oh, you're gonna scoop the mids, and you're just like, that doesn't really.
No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're getting to time here.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything that I mean? First of all, thank you so much for coming on.
Anytime, yeah.
Wonderful conversation.
This has been pretty awesome because this is digging in on gear like this has been really awesome. And getting your viewpoint on it has been rad because there's a lot of stuff that I think even like the Mesa thing is still blowing my mind. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna try the clean tone on that thing now.
Yeah, you're gonna like it. Telecaster through the clean channel.
I just like dismissed it, you know. I was like clean tone. Yeah. But yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
So is there anything that you want to plug before we...
Yeah, hopefully there will be a new run of the Limelight pedals sometime in 2022. We've done a couple of runs of them and trying to get them out and be able to sell them on tour. We did it a little bit on this last tour, just like the leftovers that we had.
Awesome. Are you guys doing like custom art on it or anything like that, or?
No, we've just done 2 runs of 300. One that was like a sand colored, one that was a sparkly pink.
Okay.
Nice. And but his company is doing so well and they do so much that it's like we have to wait our turn for he's ready to get them out. So hopefully that'll be out sometime in the spring in time for our Touche Tour coming up. That's in March and April with Vane and a bunch of really cool opening bands too. So really exciting.
US?
What was that?
Is that full US or?
Yeah, it's full US tour. Yeah. So yeah, look out for that. And the entry LP last year on Southern Lord Records, and we'll have a new 7-inch, I think, probably in 2022 as well. So
great.
Yeah, just look out for that stuff.
Awesome.
7-inch full length or?
For us, I mean, it ends up, yeah, I mean, our LP was probably 14 minutes or something like that. So,
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming out.
Really appreciate it, guys, and appreciate all the bands and stuff that you guys do. So this is a pleasure to chat.
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. Appreciate it.